2020. Our guest today is Nikhil Vora, founder and CEO of Sixth Sense Ventures. Nikhil was earlier the managing director and head of research at IDFC Securities and has been regarded as one of the strongest analytical minds of the country. He believes if you fail, fail fast, die young, and live again because you will have a chance to do it again. Nikhil is amongst the first few investors in Paytm, Parag Foods, Kangaroo Kids, and many more. We'd be more than glad to learn from you and change a little bit in the way we think. Many thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Over to you.
Thank you. Mansi, just change the video mode. I think everybody is visible on.
Okay.
Change the video mode. Yeah. Thank you, Nikhil sir, for spending this afternoon with us. I can tell you for sure that it is a privilege to have you speaking with us today. And if I'm not wrong, I think this would be your first Facebook Live session.
Yeah, it would be.
Okay, great. So in fact, with most of our speakers, it has been the first time. So it's really great for us that we are bringing in people for the first time on Facebook.
And you're learning right now.
And frankly, it's very tough to hear from you these days in media also because you come very, very often, I would say. I'm so happy that you agreed to do it with us and share your wisdom and understanding with us.
Thanks so much, Vikas, for having me over. I remember something that you sent a couple of years back. So it makes me feel very humble and I need to live up to that. So thank you.
No, absolutely. I owe it a big way to you. Whatever stock understanding that I have, learned or have with me is definitely to you because the valuation things definitely goes to you without saying about it. And without taking much of the time now, Nikhil, since you are more in private investing space now, why don't we start this conversation where you can help us understand a little bit about Sixth Sense, what do you do over here, your investments, and then maybe we'll spend more time knowing other things and question answers with you.
Thanks, Vikas, and welcome to everyone around this. So I think it's quite strange. Frankly, I've been in public market for almost 23 years. And when I started my own entrepreneurial journey, it happened to be a private market space. So it's a venture fund which I lead and head, which is Sixth Sense Ventures. So it's somewhere a contrast because frankly, I thought I did reasonably good in my public market life as a professional. And yet when I thought about what I needed to do for the next 10, 20 years and what really will drive businesses and values, I thought it is really going to be in the private market space. It's interesting because, I think it's also interesting because, if we look at what we've done over the last 2-3 decades, it is about advising companies about what we think they need to do in the future. It's about what we believe the businesses should be doing in the next 10, 20 years to be relevant for tomorrow. I possibly question myself about is public market the way to be for the next 10, 20 years? I found that answer to be a bit of a struggle. And I said, no, it's unlikely that public market will be that. And private markets were giving me that feeling that that's the space to be in. So I decided to venture into private market and thereby set up Sixth Sense Ventures around 6 years back. It's also interesting because, if I look at what's happened very recently, right? A platform like Jio or Reliance raises almost $25 billion. And they raised $25 billion in entirely new age businesses, which are disruptive in its own nature. And frankly, for everything that they've done, they've struggled to raise money in their old age business, which is the oils business. Saudi Aramco has still not closed the deal. So it's quite a strange phenomena, but something which is also indicative of the fact that businesses which are relevant for the next 10, 20 years are all in the private domain or significantly in the private domain. And that is where, if you are an early entrant, then there is more than enough value which can be captured over a longer term. So if every investor's domain is about making capital over a period of time, I see no reason why a significant part of the portfolio at some stage should not be in the private domain. Having said that, so we set up Sixth Sense around 6 years back, ironically. And today, where we are a two-fund setup. The first fund was interesting. We were the best performing fund in the country. The second fund, we raised the money the fastest in the country. In the second fund, we also did the first time in India, which is create a 0% management fee structure. We said that if we don't make returns for our investors, we'll charge nothing and we'll fund ourselves for the next 7, 8 years. And I think that's really the way to do it. And that's the ethos that we're building up, that whatever we do, and hopefully everything that we do, is extremely credible in the way it should be. And something which is fair for all stakeholders involved, be it investors at one hand, or be it even for founders like us or sponsors like us who are willing to take that shot. So that's what we've done. We've been fairly successful in our own small journey till now. Obviously, it's very limited. It's still early days in our entrepreneurial journey, but I think it's been a very satisfying one for me. It's also a matter of great satisfaction for us that Ministry of Commerce has invested in our second fund. It's a rarity, and they've done that in our fund. And like I said, we are too young for them, but they found possibly all the ingredients to be right for them to trust us with it. So that's very satisfying. We've also been part of an early journey of a lot of our investee companies. You did name a few companies which I was part of personally. So I think the journey really started around maybe 15 years back when I started to invest in early stage companies, where I was amongst the first investor in all of those companies, be it Paytm, Vini Cosmetic, BVG Limited, or Purple.com, or Bavekoof, Kangaroo Kids, and so on, Parag Milk. So all these companies, frankly, in their own journey, became leaders or amongst the top 2-3 players in their own domain, created disproportionate value for me as a shareholder, and gave me the feeling that this is the right way to go, which is come in early into businesses where your belief is, come in early into businesses which you believe has a long lifespan ahead of it, and thereby create value over a period of time. And that was really what got me to set up Sixth Sense. Hopefully, we've only continued that journey. We've been part of quite a few emerging businesses from Sixth Sense, be it Hindustan Foods, which has become India's largest contracting company in consumers, be it Viva Brands, which is one of the most powerful brands in India right now. And the fact is there are very few brands which have been created in the country in the last 10 years. So Viva clearly is one, or Bira for that matter. And we've been part of education. So UFS Learning, which is one of the finest edtech companies in India, which is the only profitable edtech company in second year of corporation. So I think we've fulfilled a bit of a journey. It's still a long road ahead of us, but very satisfying where we are today, and just hope we continue.
Absolutely. I mean, the kind of performance and the way in which people talk about Sixth Sense is an absolute testimonial of that. What you have just shared with us. Now, taking this conversation forward, Nikhil, I remember in one of the recent talks that you had at one of the forum, you had spoken about third-party manufacturing players as a theme. I mean, it would be great if you could give us some view of that space.
So it's very interesting, Vikas, and I've been a consumer guy all my 28 years till now, right? That's what we would want to believe ourselves to be. The fact is, and the irony in India is that two brands or two players control almost 75-80% of any category in consumers that you can think of. And this is true for the last 5 decades of India, 5, 6, 7 decades of India, right? Which is quite ironic because the market in India is obscenely large. The consumer base in India is extremely large and diverse, and yet 2 brands or 2 companies control 75-80% of the market. Our belief is, and that started to happen around 5-6 years back, our belief is that a lot of this will change. Brands will become hyper competitive, or at least competitive at the first instance. And if brands get competitive, it means that there'll be a flux of new brands which will get created in India. And they are getting created because platforms of distribution have changed or are changing. It's no longer physical offline models which were becoming so relevant for the last 5-7 decades in India. It's no longer the distribution muscle of a Unilever or an ITC or a Colgate, which meant that no one else could create a brand because there was just no way to take shelf space against a Colgate because distributors would knock you off. I thought that that will change completely. So new models of distribution were getting established. E-commerce started to happen. Regional distribution happened. Third party happened. And more the money which gets into creating new brands more the ability of existing brand leaders to let go of their manufacturing businesses. Because every brand would want to protect a 60-70% ROI business, which is brands, and let go of 15 to 17% ROI, which is manufacturing. And that was a big theme in our mind, that manufacturing will get subcontracted, and that will move out from the current manufacturing that is controlled by consumer brands. And that is almost a $30 billion of opportunity, which is right now controlled by the OEMs or the brand owners. And ironically, it comes at a time when large-scale manufacturers in India are not really present. There are very few quality contracting companies which are present in India. I could frankly think of no more than 8 to 10 such companies in India, which meant that even if whenever large-scale manufacturing was getting contracted out, it would be these handful of companies which have a chance and an option to make it big. So subcontracting was our way to invest and thereby make it large. We did that in a couple of names that we invested in. We invested in a company called JHS, which was India's largest oral care manufacturer. They controlled almost 14% of Indian oral care capacity. We sold it at 7 times in less than 2 years after we invested from the first fund. And we invested in a company called Hindustan Foods, which has now become India's largest consumer contracting company. They were a 35 crore company 4 years back in 2017. They are almost an 800 crore company last year. And I think we're just starting to see it grow now. So you can imagine the scale of the business, which moved up by almost 20 times in the last 3 to 4 years. And we still think that the journey is incomplete and there's still a lot more to go. So there's a lot of belief in what can happen. And obviously that belief has got translated in the marketplace also, as values of the businesses have moved quite sharply. So something like Hindustan Foods, where we invested first at 40 bucks, is now at 700 rupees. And it's a listed company. And like I said, it still looks exciting to us. So I think that was the theme of contracting and why that will become large. And frankly, because I think we see this in a lot of spaces now. So the Dixons of the world have evolved and become relevant. Hindustan Foods is in that zone. So I think you're starting to see value migrate now to not just brands, but also to contracting businesses, which are the brawn behind the brands.
Absolutely, and it looks like it's going to be the largest possible opportunity in consumption space in times to come.
It is a bit of a virgin space relatively, because I think it's also a bit to do with history and legacy. I think earlier investors who have a long memory, including me, would possibly shy away from investing in contracting because it used to be a principal-agent relationship. So theoretically, Unilever will decide what the subcontractor should make in life, and thereby his life and death depended on Unilever. Today, it's no longer the case. I think the fact is that when you are a multifaceted manufacturing unit, you have almost the entire consumer world, which is wanting to have you as one of their manufacturing base. And thereby, your ROEs of the businesses are a lot more consistent, a lot more sharper, and a lot more sustainable. To give you just one example, earlier contracts used to be for 3 to 5 years. Contract size would be possibly in the 25 to 100 crore range. Today, contract size has moved to almost 3 to 500 crores and more. Contract tenure has moved from 3 to 5 years to 9 to 12 years. So theoretically, any business that you're looking at in this category, and assuming that you've got an extremely good execution founder involved in it, you've got almost a 10-year visibility of the business the day you invested, which is not something that you can bet on almost any business.
True. Nikhil, consumption space in India has always been of great interest for investors. But bearing a few large names, not many have given consistent returns over the last 5 to 7 years. Is it driven by economic slowdown and other macro factors or something else? And if I could add, how should one play this space, which has immense potential?
It's very interesting because, there are dual answers to this in some form. One is about the fact that there are leaders in the space, and obviously whatever you see right now is, and I'm sure all your viewers see, is pretty much the listed domain. So you keep looking at the Unilevers and ITCs and Colgates of the world. Uh, I think there is a world beneath it. So one is about the existing leaders. I surely think that the strength of a consumer business and a consumer brand lies in the fact of its longevity, the ability to straddle across price segments, across categories, leverage the brand across domains. So what Dove does is pretty much go across domains. So you have enough triggers to keep running this machinery for a decade or two or more. Uh, Having said that, obviously there are businesses which have not kept pace. I wouldn't say they've failed, but they've not kept pace, and thereby theoretically they've failed, right? So if there's a great opportunity, and if you've not been part of that opportunity curve, then clearly you've not done much. So if I look at some of the businesses, like let's say ITC for instance, and that's one of my favorite examples. I've been negative on ITC for almost a decade. Uh, and it's nothing to do with their earnings, their cash flows, and so on. Nothing to do with that. It's just about the fact that, if you've got firstly, your core category is something which is fundamentally a price-driven growth model. It's not a volume-driven growth model at all, not in India, not anywhere in the world. So clearly there is only as much leverage that you'll have on price over a period of time. Second is the fact that when you get into categories which naturally you should, which is get into foods and other categories. I think if there is one big failure in India, and I'm just being very, very skeptical and critical about this, but if I think there's one big failure in consumer business in India, it's not the Jyoti Labs or the Imamis or maybe the other mid-tier companies. And I'm not saying they are failures, but they've not kept up to the mark. But I think it is ITC. ITC has been a failure in the consumer business in India. They had distribution, they had capital, they had almost a virgin market in food. There is not a single player who controls more than 3% of the food market in India, right? And there is a need for a player to evolve in that category. And yet if you look at all their categories, today they don't control more than 15 to 20% market share in any category that they are present in. Very weakish entry, I would say in most of the categories that they've been present in. Despite the fact that capital was never ever a constraint, the fact is they had more capital than anyone ever could have invested in. You look at other players also, and clearly they've missed a trick or two, I think. So Colgate, for instance, they're almost like God in oral care. I don't think they have ability to manage anything beyond oral care. They've proved themselves to be a non-player in personal care categories, which is very strange, right? Because if you get so much of cash generation capability and so much of ability to create such a formidable brand in India in dental care, there is no reason why you could not move the brand into other place, unless your belief is that this category itself will grow 5 times in the next 10 years, which is not the case in oral care. So while they've done fantastic in their category presence, but I think they've been a very poor, not capital allocator, as also delivery in other segments. So that's the truth almost across the board in most categories, if you look at. So, I think the irony is that I think there's a lot of belief that most of the consumer companies will get it right eventually. And that is the reason why you pay a value which is anywhere from 40 to 80 times earning into these companies and businesses today. There is also a fact that today's earnings are not lost anywhere. There is enough trigger points even for the core businesses or even for the tier 2 companies to keep doing it and sustaining what they're doing today. But I just think that there's just so much of opportunity which is just going a begging. And that is the reason why I think at some stage there will be stagnation of values, which is what you saw in ITC for the last 10 years. For almost 8 to 10 years, I think ITC's market capitalization and values are at the same level which it used to be 10 years back. It's actually lower, which is not true for their cash flows. Their cash flows have improved disproportionately, but the values have not. I think beyond a Unilever or a Nestle, which again went through the same patch which ITC is going through today, let's say 10 years back, I think they've come back a lot more stronger, a lot more agile. I don't see that sort of agility across the board. It's in pockets, but it's not across the board. So if values have not kept pace, I think that's for a very fair reason. Second is, I think there are a lot of value migration which is happening to disruptors. The fact is that, and I'm sure you will realize this, that if you look at the last couple of decades in India, not a single new brand has been created by the existing leaders.
Correct.
Not a single new brand.
Absolutely.
It has been created by challengers, by disruptors who were not even present in those categories in the last 10, 20 years. So for whatever our likes and dislikes might be, let's say Patanjali created a brand. The fact is that Vini Cosmetic evolved from almost nowhere to become the market leader in deos in India with Fog. The fact that Viva created a distribution in a category which is very futuristic, which let's say a Nor did not do it for levers, or ITC did not do it with, let's say, Ashirvad. So I think there are a lot of misses which have happened, or even Bira for that matter. And I'm not saying that these are all successful brands and stuff, but I think they've proven disruption. Bira is done it very new age to what maybe Kingfisher has been trying to do for the last so many years. The issue is that success baggage is just too much to shake. And you don't give up your success today for what you can achieve tomorrow, because that's a bit uncertain. But I think disruptors are players who want to bet on that uncertainty over a longer period of time, and thereby create a longevity for their business, which possibly leaders did a couple of decades back.
No, very well put, I think, Nikhil. And in fact, this was one of the questions which I wanted to ask you, but I think you have answered it right over here only. That in last 10, 15 years, we haven't seen many big brands getting emerging in this country. Maybe what, 3 or 4 large brands we might have seen in last 10 years? Paytm, Patanjali, maybe Paperboat to an extent in consumption. But why do you think that this has happened? Is it the callousness at these large organization level? Or is it a lot to do with that they have reached a level and probably brands are no more required at their level?
That's not true, because I think the collective failure of the consumer leaders, so to speak, has been the fact that I think somewhere they, my belief is, and I keep struggling with this issue with almost all the consumer founders and CEOs, is that I think there is a need to think like what Dove did for Unilever, which meant that Dove, which started as a soap, became a beauty product, and then became almost like a must-have product in your portfolio. So I think did the migration of the brand happen as efficiently as the categories that they should be present in? I think that did not keep pace. So theoretically, what Maggi, and they're starting to do it now, but what Maggi created as its brand, could it have moved into many categories, which they're doing it now, but could it have been done earlier? The same is true for almost all brands that you can think of. You don't move Wills to saying Wills lifestyle retail. That's just you're killing the brand. You're not extending the brand. I just think there's just so much of on the face failure, which I see, and which I struggle with all these companies, because obviously I've known them for a couple of decades. I think there is just a collective failure also to shake away from the success that they have today. So it's always this challenge that all of us face. So I'm not singling them out, but all of us face the success baggage. And if you succeed in a particular way of doing work and business, your team succeeds in the same way. Almost everyone is reluctant to see change, because change is uncertain, and professionals love to see consistency. I think entrepreneurs could have done a better job. So if, let's say, Mariwala could have done a better job in Marico, or Burman's doing it in Dabur, or Godrej doing it in GCPL, I think they had a better chance of, and they've done a good job, but I think could have done a lot better, because they could have been innovators and disruptors in categories which players like Nestle would take a few years to get into those categories. They would have been a lot more agile. The Indian companies could have been a lot more agile. I see that agility to be in abundance with Indian entrepreneurs of today, and which is frankly the bet that Sixth Sense is placing also, that we want to bet on entrepreneurs like who have no baggage and are willing to disrupt their own businesses. I think that is where opportunity would lie.
Right, right. Now, Nikhil, this is one question, which we get asked almost in all our meetings, with all our interaction with investors. How to play FMCG? It is so expensive, at least in listed space. How one should look at it?
So it's interesting, right? So I think investors' fiduciary responsibility is to make money out of what they're doing. Uh, I think it's important that you. So it's interesting, right? If you look at the largest players in any category, let's look at e-commerce for example. And I'm just throwing anecdotal references. But let's say if you struggle to buy the Amazons and Flipkarts and Paytms of the world, then the idea is to back players who are part of that ecosystem, right? So that is a very easy proxy to do. Especially you may not be comfortable, let's say, putting money in Paytm at $15 billion, which I'm sure most of us will struggle. But I think if there are players who are backing, let's say, an Amazon ecosystem, and it could be a logistics play, it could be a distribution play, it could be a third-party play, it could be packaging guys, it could be private label guys, it could be contracting companies. So I think there are enough pockets that one needs to get seized about, and which is what we do it in consumer domain too. So if I think that Unilever is too expensive for me at, let's say, 70x earnings, but I know that Unilever will remain relevant even 10 years forward, then I want to back players who are part of the Unilever ecosystem, because Unilever will ensure that the ecosystem also makes adequate money, right? Because they are part of that platform. So could I look at guys who are contracting with Unilever, guys who are making private labels for an Amazon, guys who are doing packaging for some other companies? I think there will always be proxies that you should be aware of and look at. The second layer is also saying that in consumers, what is the new trend which will be relevant 10, 20 years forward, 10 years forward, let's say. So if I look at platforms now, like I said before, right, the biggest USP of consumer business for the last 5-7 decades, and the biggest disruption which will happen for the next couple of decades will be distribution. I think distribution was the big moat for all the consumer companies earlier. I think that will no longer be the moat for the next few years. So if there are players who are creating disruption in distribution, I think that could become very, very exciting to buy into. So they are in the private domain right now, but let's say a Nykaa or a Purple, which have created a fantastic distribution platform for personal care products. I think they are very, very interesting, because there is no reason why a consumer will not want to be part of that segment. The same 7 manufacturers in the world manufacture for every brand across, right? So a L'Oreal manufacturer, the Maybelline manufacturer, everyone does it from the same manufacturers. And why would you not want to be part of a platform where there are 1 million consumers coming every day and buying products from it? So a Nykaa and a Purple become very valuable platform. So I think you need to pick and choose. You'll need to pick and choose where some of the brands have also become so formidable that the cost of growing 1 percentage point incremental market share is just too expensive. Yeah. So let's say a P&G, for instance, P&G in feminine hygiene category, right? If they control 60% of the sanitary pad market, is it going to be worth their while to become 65% market share? I don't think so. The cost of that incremental 2, 3, 5% is going to be disproportionately large. But it's a great market share for a challenger brand to come in and nibble into 8-10% market share very easily, because the leaders will not even know about the challenger brand or battle an eyelid, because they would lose maybe 2 percentage point market share. Not very relevant for them. Yeah. So I think it's very interesting if investors get seized about these opportunities, which a lot of them will be in the private space. There are a lot of it in the private domain. So could be interesting challenger brands, could be also brands or businesses where you think the categories are not being addressed by leaders of today. Again, a simple example is that most of the current consumer names love to get into a category only if the category becomes at least $100 million, at least 500 to 700 crores in size. They don't come into the category before that, right? So if you look at Maggi had a free run till 1,000 crores, and then a couple of players came in. Look at popcorn, right? Conagra, which does popcorn. That's a 400 crore category and not a single player. The they'll possibly have a free run till 600 and then figure it out. So I think if you get categories where you think of Viva, for instance, right now, right, it's almost a 400 crore brand, and no player. They control the B2B market, they control the B2C market today. So I think there is, when I say no player, it just means that at least 60% of the market is with the leader in that category. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to see that there could be vacuums in some play, and as a challenger, or even if you're a leader, if you start to participate in that vacuum, I think that is what you need to bind.
Right. Nikhil, it is great to see that, you know, you have been encouraging young entrepreneurs with solid products and helping them grow their businesses bigger and bigger. How do you think we could learn from other markets like US, where startups flourish and lead to enormous depth in the markets?
You know, it's interesting because I think a couple of things that I can talk about in this. One is startups flourish if you believe that they have a chance to survive. Yeah. So if you talked about Indian venture market and consumer business, let's say 20 years back, I frankly think it was never capital which was the differentiator. It was distribution power. You could not have broken the distribution might of a Unilever or a Colgate or a ITC and so on, or Reckitt for that matter. So even if you had money, you would do nothing. And that's the reason why you saw no brand evolve for the last 20, 30 years in India, right? Excluding a Nirma, which happened a couple of decades back, which is almost history now. But I think capital comes in when you think there is an opportunity for a player to make a difference and make it relevant. I think that capital is now available in India, in the Indian consumer ecosystem, which I can start to see and sense it quite a bit. You know, we've been part of this for the last 6 years as 6 Sense Ventures. We've done that a bit. So we've made our small little contribution to that and obviously monetize on all our investments as we move forward. But I think that's the big opportunity that today you think that there's just so much of disruption which will happen in the consumer landscape. Indian consumers, as I'm very, very fond of saying this, Indian consumers brand awareness is at an all-time high and brand loyalty is at an all-time low. Yeah, which just means that this is just a perfect time for challengers to come in and create a dent. And challengers will require capital, and capital always comes in where there is a smell or a sense that this capital will work wonders. So I don't think there's any dearth of capital chasing the Indian consumer businesses. We were the first guys in that space, but I'm sure almost every fund has migrated or morphed also to do consumer investing, which is a great sign, which is also a sign of saying that this is the time of arrival for a lot of these brands and a lot of these businesses. So, and also, you know, it's very interesting because that if you look at a lot of global markets, two brands or two companies, even if they control the market, they don't control more than 40% of those categories. So if you look at US, they don't control more than 40% of the category share. In India, it is almost 75-80%. So even by default, the two largest players can't control more than 50% of Indian market. So, while the market will grow, so it's not that their revenues will shrink and decline, but their revenue growth will be lower to the market growth, and thereby that incremental market growth is going to be taken by challenges. So I think that is a big opportunity for investors like us, and I'm sure a lot of investors to monetize over a period of time. Because again, there's this beautiful thing in consumer business, which is it's always a seller's market. It's never a buyer's market. So, you know, if I'm a owner of a consumer stock, I decide what value I want to sell it at, because it's you know, after you hit a couple of 100 crores in revenue and you become very profitable because this is a 40 to 50% gross margin business. At 100 crores, you start to make money. At 200, you're sitting on a lot of money. So there is enough capital which is always available. These are non-dilutive businesses, so it's always a seller's choice when they want to sell that, and thereby the pricing is determined by that. And that's why the valuation the way it is right now in most of the consumer business in India.
Right. Nikhil, share us some of your success stories if you could, and how you, you know, landed up on some of them. People, you know, have written, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 WhatsApp have already come in about Paytms, because that has really become a lot of success for you.
Yeah.
But I think there are far things beyond that as well.
Now, I'll share the names, but it's not to go overboard on the capital that one makes out of it, but to sense that these were the right businesses at the right point to look at. Obviously, Paytm is slightly better known. It's been a fairly largish one. But there are a lot of companies, right? So Paytm, Vini Cosmetic, look at BVG, which is now the largest facilities management company in India, Purple.com, which is one of the largest personal care platform in India, along with Nykaa. Kangaroo Kids, which is one of the finest educational networks in India. Financial Technologies, when it was a listed company, was a fairly largish one for me, because I thought it was really a platform which has its own journey, and they had created a very formidable platform, and obviously that all spanned into different markets and different geographies and so on. So I think what was unique in all of them, or rather what was similar in all of them, was the fact that almost across the board, these were businesses which were run by some of the finest founders I can think of. They were addressing an extremely large space by itself, and with a product which had its own uniqueness in some form or the other. So, like I keep saying, it's a smart ass team in a big ass market with a kick ass product. I think that was almost true across the board. So if it was Paytm, it was about thinking that can India be, and I was among the first early investors in it. It was about thinking whether can India be one of the largest mobile pop in the world, which India is. India is the second largest mobile pop in the world. And if you have any app which sits on the mobile, then you've captured the most expensive real estate in the world, which is again true. That if Paytm, which became a wallet and then created a wallet on the mobile, I think that did it, right? Because if you are capturing possibly 15 to 20 spots of real estate on a mobile phone, then you are a $1 billion company. You have to be a $1 billion company, because that's the only space for 15, 20 apps in you. So if you look at what your mobile phone captures and what all the audience mobile phones are, it will have the Uber and Olas of the world. It will possibly have a Swiggy. It will have possibly Paytm and so on. All of them are $1 billion plus, right? So that was an early thought, and frankly, whatever Vijay did and Paytm did over the years just became legendary in some form. Let's see how that journey goes from here on, but obviously they did a fantastic job to date. Look at Vini Cosmetic. It was about the belief that a consumer business needs to get disrupted. It needs to be shaken. You don't need to be an innovator, not necessary. I think the prerequisite is that you need to be a disruptor, because the market sizes are large. So if everyone was selling deos on the basis that you put on a deo and you'll smell good and 10 girls chase you, they changed the belief. They just said that you put on a deo and we'll not cheat you. You'll get more spray per you'll get zero gas, so more spray per can that you use. Worked wonders, because suddenly everyone had the belief that you have to smell good. So it was a uniform belief, no point overstating that belief. So just the fact that you said that you put this on and I'm not cheating you went very well. So suddenly 25% of the consumers moved into fog, and that became a new way of using it, became a leader. BVG, which is India's largest facilities management company today, they employ almost 1 lakh people. It's amazing, right? And that's been almost an 8-10 year journey for me in this 10-year journey plus. It's fantastic, right? Indians are used to assistance in almost everything that we do, right from our homes to our offices to our drivers and so on. There is no sense why that market would not have grown. So if you are looking at facilities management, which is almost everything to do with assistance, that would become large over a period of time. Did brilliant, right? So I think because what is also interesting is that I think all of us as investors somewhere get lost, and I'm saying it as an analyst also in my mind, that all of us tend to get lost with so many data points around us, so many variables around us, that we want to capture each and every variable and make it right before we invest. I think the fact is that all you need to do, and that's what I would feel appropriate, but I think you need to get your 2 or 3 reasons right why this business is good for you. I think if you get that 2 reasons right, you've cracked it. You don't need to get 30 reasons right to invest in a business. So like they say, right, like possibly Amitabh Bachchan said, "Soch gehri ho jaye to faisle kamzor ho jate hain." I think that's precisely the case. I think you can't overkill on a business. I think if you get your broad direction right, and like I said, the 3 attributes of kick-ass promoter, big-ass market, smart-ass product, I think if you get these 3 attributes right, I think you will do fine.
Right. Nikhil, I want you to share your thoughts on two sectors. I know you have been really big fan of these particular industries for that matter. One is definitely dairy. You had invested in one of the companies which is listed today now. But if you see in a larger context, there are only two players which are really big in this industry. One is Amul and other is Nestle. We have got ITCs and levers of the world in this segment, but they have never came or explored this industry. Why is it so?
It's a very interesting space, frankly. So, and it's a very unique space also because in dairy in India, you've got two real lead players. One is Amul and the second is Nestle. You obviously got Britannia and Parag and so on, but the two lead players are really Amul and Nestle. One guy does not want to make money, right? So Amul is not in this journey to make money. The second guy is there to make a lot of money. So Nestle will not ever, almost ever, have an EBITDA margin of below 20% in the businesses that they are running, and thereby gross margins which are much, much higher and so on. So, to now create shelf space against someone who does not want to make money and someone who wants to make money, there's a very narrow bucket that you have presence in. Parag or Britannia are somewhere in the mid segment, but it's a tough. There's so much of super brand loyalty of Amul, and there's just so much of let's say a marketing power of Nestle on the other hand, that to create your shelf and create space and make it relevant for two or three more players to evolve, it's a bit of a challenge. But obviously give it credit to Britannia and a Parag Milk, who've at least created some shelf presence for themselves and thereby become large in at least few market geographies that they are present in. Now, dairy is also a slightly peculiar business because it is a slightly regionalized business. The key strength of dairy is always about milk procurement, and that's a very regional subject, right? So you will have players who will become very dominant in their own geography. So let's say a heritage food will be very strong in south. You'll have someone who will be fairly strong in north and so on, but they will be regional dominant pockets. I'm not too sure that they have the ability to go pan-India. They have the risk appetite to go pan-India and take on the behemoths like Amul and Nestle. I think Parag has done it quite successfully in terms of product. They need to obviously ensure that the same happens on the balance sheet and so on. Britannia has obviously done it because they're used to lower margin profile of their business. So Britannia runs bakery, biscuits, which is a very lowish margin business. So dairy comes into that scheme of things. A Unilever or an ITC struggles because they're not used to low margin businesses. They cannot sell oil. They cannot sell dairy. These are very low margin businesses. The teams are not adept at doing it. The structure of Unilever and ITC will not really allow them to do it.
Right. And the second which I wanted you to share with us is on liquor. You own Bira for that matter. But this is one industry from which, we had very large expectations that they make hell of a money out in the business. And yet, as far as the listed space is concerned, the returns have really not been there for investors.
Completely true. So there are again a couple of ways of looking at it. One is to say I will invest when I see pure economics come back in the business. So let's say a 20% ROC coming in the business or stuff like that could be a parameter. Profitability inherent starting to reflect. Second is to say that should I be investing in this business because at some stage, not now, but I remember when we were the first guys to look at liquor almost 15 years back. Yeah. I remember at that point the cumulative market cap of liquor was like $250 million in India, which was completely absurd, right? So there's just no merit in that sort of value. So you felt that the space will grow, become disproportionately large. And thereby any player who's a large category player has to become valuable, which was frankly our call very, very early in life. What has happened over the last few years is that I think, see the way liquor business is run in India is not akin to what happens globally, right? So it's almost like a state subject. There are a lot of import and export duties for liquor interstate. Every state liquor is possibly the first or second line item in terms of revenue. So obviously there is a lot of state government indulgence into taxation and other policies which really matter. So it's going to be tough to believe that this is a business which will make normative profits over a normal life cycle or immediate life cycle. So next 5 years, let's say that. I think that would be a bit of a challenge. You will have to live with the fact that if you are an investor in this, you want to believe that if there are 30 states in India right now, over the next 5 years, at least 50% of the states will go to free market, which means that the companies have the ability to sell, distribute the product, and monetize the way they feel appropriate, and not sell through the state governments, which almost controls the pricing, right? So if you think that is the way India will head in the next 5-10 years, then I think this is clearly a business to be part of. The fact is that liquor businesses worldwide are always a lot more valuable than cigarette businesses are. So in India, it's almost reversed by a factor of 3 or more. Yes. So I think there's every reason to be part of such a business over a longer time period, but it has to be with a belief. It has to be with a belief that over the next 5-10 years, Indian governments, state governments will become a lot more liberal, and they would see merit in the fact that letting free sale of liquor, both distribution and pricing, will actually fill up their coffers a lot more than controlling the entire market. I think if you're on that side, I think you'll be doing good. We've invested in Bira. It's one of our investments from the fund. Like I think it's almost a monopolized category in India, just as liquor is, beer is. The single player controls almost 60% market share. And our sense is that, like I think, it's becoming a slightly fatigued brand. I think Kingfisher is becoming a bit of a fatigue brand. It's a brand of yesterday or brand of today. It's not necessarily a brand of tomorrow. And I think there is a great market vacuum which can open up for a player like Bira, which is slightly more new age. It is very funky. It has got different flavors. It's got products which possibly attract the new age consumer, and thereby it can become a fairly relevant, strong market to be part of. So we've invested in that. We'll see how the journey goes, but looks exciting to us.
Completely agree, Nikhil. Nikhil, this would be last question before I take 2 or 3 questions from our investors, which has been sent across to you. Any regret or misses in this 25-year journey out here?
Oh, that's a tough one. And I'm saying it with all honesty as much as I can in this. I frankly don't think there's any regret. If you regret if you believe that you wanted to invest in something and you did not, or you liked a business and yet you were not part of it. Frankly, I've not seen it in my journey personally, or even with Sixth Sense. If we are keen on a business, I think we'll figure a way out of investing. If you're not keen and the business becomes fairly large, great. But it's better to be a convinced investor into anything that you do, rather than being an unconvinced investor in a business which does very well. I'm not sure whether we will have the ability and the aptitude to stay put in a business where our conviction is not 100%. I think the good part in India is that there is just so much of entrepreneurship which is brewing across the board. We will have our own opportunities. We will create our own niche in businesses which we are very, very comfortable about. We tend to be fairly involved investors into our investments. So if we think we can add value in businesses, then when we'll invest. And it gives me more satisfaction to be in that side of the market than the other side. Not to suggest that we would not have missed a lot of companies, but I don't think we missed any companies because we liked something and yet we could not do it. Maybe those companies never approached us. Maybe our conviction was never there in those businesses, and which is perfectly okay.
Right. Nikhil, we have received one question from one of our clients, and they wish to understand from you, what are the big investment opportunities in consumption space that you see in next 5 years?
Look out for what we possibly invest in the next year or so. But again, it's slightly difficult to say what is completely a vacuum, because the fact in India is that anything that is virgin, and we believe there's a great opportunity, there'll be overcrowding which will happen in a very, very near term, believe me. So if we, and this is true across the board, right? Telecom was a virgin opportunity sometime back, and suddenly you had 5 players coming into it, or rather 15 players, and that became 5. You think that hygiene is a virgin space. It's just 3-month old, right? Health, hygiene, which has really become so central for everyone. Suddenly, Asian Paints is also selling hygiene products, and Reckitt is doing it, and everyone you can think of sells the same products, right? So I think it's difficult to say that what is virgin and will remain a great opportunity over the next 5 years. I think what is easier to assess is that what is a bit of a vacuum today, or what is virgin today, and what will become large over a period of time, but not necessarily to suggest that that is the space to invest in today. Sometimes you want to let overcrowding get over with, let the survival instincts remain, let people burn capital, and then make your entry point. In some businesses, you may not want to do it. So, like I think dips and sauces, we think is a very sexy business to be in. It's very tough to change taste buds in India. So, but all the QSR networks have done it. So the McDonald's and Pizza Huts and Domino's, everyone's changed our taste buds into knowing what our dips and sauces taste like. Then it flies off the shelf. The same is true with Nutella, right? Because now everyone knows what it tastes like from B2B, and then it will fly off the shelf on B2C. So those are interesting cases to look at, and I'm sure we will find enough opportunities like this. Contracting, I've always said, is to me still it's not as virgin as it used to be, but it's still very, very under penetrated in some form. So there's enough leeway to make it relevant and big as an investor in this. There are platforms which I think which are not part of the 4 mainstream platforms, so not part of Amazon, Flipkart, Paytm, Jio, which can become very relevant. So because the TG of all the 4 lead platforms is almost the same. It is frequent shoppers, discount shoppers, almost the same TG for everyone. Whereas for vertical platforms, which might be very interesting, you might see people who are very, very specified TG. So you might have women shoppers, frequent shoppers, but not so price conscious shoppers. And that's why platforms like Nykaa and Purple become very relevant. There are opportunities in India where I think any space where a lot of balance sheet has been invested in India. If you capture the PNL, I think that's a great opportunity. So let's say a fitness platform. Again, we've invested in that, but I can relate to these examples. We've invested in a company called Fiternity, which is India's largest fitness platform. So they aggregate all the gyms, studios, swimming pools, clubs, and so on. So if today I want to do a Pilates, and then tomorrow I want to do gymming, day after I want to do swimming, I can do it on a single platform, which is not done otherwise, right? So one pass will create that flexibility for me to do swimming in, let's say, JW Marriott, and do Pilates in Gold Gym or something else, right? So I think you will have players who come into those pockets. A D2C brand becomes very relevant. So digital to consumer or direct to consumer brands. Again, we've invested in a couple of them like Vadam Teas and Bombay Shaving, which are completely digital brands. They've evolved digitally and moving very strongly on the consumer side. Over a period, they will possibly go offline also. Some of them would. But I think that's again a great opportunity for players to look at. There are categories which are interesting in consumers. So feminine hygiene is again relatively not as widely distributed category in India, and I think there's again huge opportunity to be a player in it. So we've invested in a company called Soothe Healthcare, which does Pari brand. Again, I think great opportunity for them to become relevant. So enough place, but you have to be sensitive to when you really time it there into those categories.
Right. But this is a very interesting question which has come in, Nikhil. What is the big difference between public investing and private investing? You have done both for that matter.
Okay. Very frankly, again, 2 things, right? One is I've been in public market for 23 years, and I thought I was fairly okay at it. And I've been in private markets for the last 6 years. And I think we're doing a fairly okay job in that also. So, I think the first big optical thing that all of us think about when we look at public and private markets as 2 different buckets is the liquidity aspect. That the belief is that public market is very liquid, private market is not as liquid, which is half true, half not so true. I think that in both the cases, right, or rather in private market, as long as the businesses do well, there are more than 10 layers of investors who will be willing to buy you out. So I don't think liquidity is such a big ask, which earlier it used to be in India, let's say 10 years back. I think there is a fair bit of liquidity which is there in private markets also. And I can say it from my own example. I've sold maybe 6 businesses which I had invested personally over the last 5-7 years, and I've sold them all not through an IPO route. I've sold it to next investors who came in and bought me out. So there's enough liquidity which happens in businesses which are doing well. In businesses which don't do well, I think there is as much illiquidity in public market as it would be in private market. So frankly, not too much of a difference. The bigger difference in public and private is about what your belief is about whether there is a maturity life cycle that you're buying into, which is what a public market does. To me, public market is a completely mature life cycle business, whereas private market is not. And anything that we do in life, it's about, we look at future, right? We're looking at the next 10, 20 years. There's no reason why I would not want to be part of the next 10, 20 years rather than being part of the last 10, 20 years. So I think that's the big difference. The fact that, let's say, even Mukesh Ambani spend almost 90% of his AGM time speaking about Jio and Jio retail, and 10% on energy and oil. I think that shows where the preferences are moving. I'm just making this anecdotal and reference point. There are exceptions in public market for sure. And, you know, my gut is that if possibly the investable universe was in public market was possibly around 500 to 1,000 companies, let's say 5 years or 10 years back, it's now narrowed down and not increased. It's possibly narrowed down to 150, 200 companies now. So I think there is a narrow funnel that you're looking at. And thereby, if it's a narrow funnel, it's become more valuable also. Yeah, because there's just as much money which is chasing the same businesses. There is no rationale for, let's say, me trying to justify a Unilever 10 years back at 20, 25 times earning to now everyone being completely ecstatic and justifying a Unilever at 70, 80 times earning. That's only because one knows that Unilever will survive. And second is, one also knows that the funnel has become so narrow that you want to be part of that narrow funnel. So I just think that my bias is slightly clear. I am in private market, and I think that's where values will get derived. So if there's an opportunity, I would just suggest that maybe look at that side of the market.
If I could ask you just to follow up on this, you know, a lot of young fund managers these days come up and, you know, tell us that companies like Asian Paints, Nestle, Levers of the world are perpetual businesses and they need not be sold ever, whatever the valuation they might be. Now, you said that they were at 25 and today at 75. I mean, how do you wish to answer that?
No, I'm completely not in that zone. I remember having a bit of a debate with Ramdev also on this. I'm not too sure whether businesses and brands forever concept is as applicable now in this context today in India as possibly it used to be 20, 30 years back. I don't think that's true. I think the fact is, and that's true, that you know, earlier business life cycles were almost 30, 35 years. Today, successful business life cycles are no more than 15 years. And if you leave apart the first 2 years of experiment, the last 3 years of decline or maturity, then you've got 10 years of business to really milk out or be relevant as an investor. I would also urge investors to not believe that they completely own the business, because, you know, the moment you get married, I think you tend to start to believe in that longevity theory completely. My gut is that no more than 25, 50 such businesses exist in India today. And surely whatever you're investing in today, even if it lives out through the entire life cycle, the reason why you invested today will be very different to the reason why you will exit tomorrow. Yeah, because the business would have morphed. So the Reliance that you invested 5 years back and the Reliance that you will exit 3 years forward are two completely different businesses. So I'm not in the camp to believe that you need to completely buy and hold. And I'm saying it with some degree of caution, because I'm also not suggesting that you trade in. Yeah, I just think that there is this 10-year business cycle that you need to capture. That is the most efficient period for an investor to monetize and make material capital. Let me give my example, right? In some form, I've been part of Paytm since it started, or even before it started, literally, before Paytm was born. I was part of 197. I sold out, let's say a couple of years back. Paytm journey continues. But do I feel compelled to be part of Paytm for the next 5 years, I would genuinely hesitate. And it's not that whether one had capital or no. I would hesitate because I don't see the lifespan going beyond. Like I said, right, there's overcrowding in businesses which become large and dominant. There's no reason why the same will not happen in a lot of other businesses. Yeah, so just be very careful about the businesses that you choose to be part of for a long life cycle. Bajaj Finance has evolved in the last 10 years or 5 years. Will it be as dominant in the next 10 years? I think we can have our own judgment on that. If it is about being capital efficient, I'm sure there will be other players who will figure that out also. So there's scarcity premium which chases a business disproportionately. I think the scarcity premium decreases as new players come in and also become a lot more efficient because they've seen the life cycle of other players. They evolve a lot more faster. So just be slightly more cognizant of that.
Got it. I think, Nikhil, we could not have ended it on a better note than this. That this buy and hold strategy is not something which is forever, and this need to be understood pretty well with our investors for that matter. Because what happens is that in process of letting this profit compound, we lose a lot at times.
Yeah, so just want to say that you have to have a very strong bias about why you're investing, what you're doing, but don't let that strength of your bias not have enough flexibility to change when it needs to. So like I would have a very strong bias in whatever I'm investing in. It has to be more than 100%. But I would also want to be flexible enough in my approach because there are variables across the board in every businesses, and just be cognizant because some businesses are great to take variables into their stride. Some businesses may just not be. And if that variable becomes very large, then you're buying a very dominant business, right? So I would just urge, and I'm sure every investor has their own journey and way to optimize themselves and their capital. I just think this is my way of doing it. I'm sure it will work differently for most investors also.
Absolutely. I think we have taken more than the required time from you, Nikhil. It has been absolutely insightful. I'm really thankful to you for spending this afternoon with us and guiding us and our investors on this journey. Thanks a lot, Nikhil.
Thanks so much to all of you. I just hope it was worthwhile for everyone. Thanks so much.
It was definitely very
absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye. Bye. Thanks.